In this video, we're going to be solving two-step equations with rational numbers. So our only essential question is, how do you solve two-step equations with rational numbers? Well, we're going to solve these equations the exact same way we solved them in the previous video with our integers. So the first thing we're going to do is undo any addition or subtraction using properties of equality, and secondly, undo any multiplication or division using properties of equality. So the same strategy is going to be used, except now we're going to be dealing with our rational numbers, which include fractions, mixed numbers, and decimals. So again, things do get more complicated with these types of equations, so it becomes even more essential that we write this down and show our work so we don't lose track of any of these numbers. So an example, 2/3 x plus 4.5 equals 8. So here we can see we have fractions and mixed numbers in this equation, but still we're going to use the same strategies. So we have addition and multiplication in this equation. So I'm going to undo the addition first, just like I did in my other two-step equations. So the opposite of adding 4.5 would be to subtract 4.5. So that's what I did to both sides of this equation. I subtracted 4.5. These terms cancel each other out and become 0. So all that's left is the 2/3 x. And 2/3 x equals 3.5, because 8 minus 4.5 is 3.5. And now I need to undo the multiplication. And by undoing that multiplication, I'm going to use division. And so I'm multiplying by 2/3. So I divided both sides by 2/3. And 2/3 x divided by 2/3 is just x. And 3.5 divided by 2/3 is 5.5. So x equals, 5 1/4. So x equals 5 1/4. And as always, checking my answer, 2/3 times 5 1/4 is 3.5. 3.5 plus 4.5 is 8. 8 equals 8. I know my solution is true. So it becomes even more essential to maybe check those answers to see if they're reasonable. So we're going to be solving these equations here. So here I have a bunch of decimals in this equation. 5.4h minus 8.9 equals negative 20.5. A lot of rational numbers going on here. So I'm going to put my dividing line here. Cut my equation into just two parts. So the first thing I want to do is undo this subtraction. So I'm going to use addition. So I'm going to add 8.9 to both sides. So I have 5.4h minus 8.9 plus 8.9 is equal to negative 20.5 plus 8.9. These two terms on the left-hand side will cancel each other out, leaving me my 5.4h. And that's going to be equal to negative 20 plus 8.9, which is negative 11.6. So there's step one, got rid of the subtraction, or undid the subtraction. And now I need to undo the multiplication. I'm going to use division to do that. So 5.4h, I'm going to divide both sides by 5.4. Not sure why it's doing that again. And 5.4h divided by 5.4 is just h, and negative 11.6 divided by 5.4, I get a repeating decimal, negative 2.148 repeating. And there's my solution. And again, I can check that. But in the interest of time, I'm not going to go through the checking because we've done that for every video so far, and you should be familiar with that. Next equation, negative 19 5/8 equals negative 3/8 m plus 4 3/4. So I have multiplication and addition. So I'm going to undo the addition first by subtracting 4 3/4 from both sides. So I have 19 5/8 minus 4 3/4 on the left-hand side. And on the right-hand side, my negative 3/8 m plus 4 3/4 minus 4 3/4. And again, those will cancel each other out. On the right-hand side, I just have my negative 3/8 times m. And on the left-hand side, 19 5/8 minus 4 3/4 is 14 7/8. And now I move on to step two, undo the multiplication. I'm going to use division. So I'm going to divide both sides by negative 3/8. And then on the right-hand side, those cancel each other out, leaving me m. And on the left-hand side, 14 7/8 divided by negative 3/8 is negative 39 2/3. So there's my solution. And again, I could check that by plugging that back into my original equation. T divided by 8.9 plus 44.3 equals 117.3. Again, cut my equation into its two parts, and I have division and addition. I'm going to undo the addition first by subtracting 44.3 from both sides. And on the right-hand side, that gives me 73. And on the left-hand side, those become 0, leaving me just the t divided by 8.9. And that's step 1. Step 2 would be undo the division. I'm going to use multiplication to do that. T divided by 8.9 times 8.9 is equal to 73 times 8.9. And these cancel each other out. I have t, and 73 times 8.9 is 649.7. And there is my solution, t equals 649.7. And then finally, 18 equals r divided by 8/15 minus 7 3/5. So I have division and subtraction. First order of business here is to undo the subtraction by adding. So I'm going to add 7 3/5 to both sides. My pen doesn't want to cooperate with me. So on the left-hand side, 18 plus 7 3/5 is 25 3/5. And that would be equal to, this becomes 0. All I have is my division, r divided by 8/15, and there's step 1. That's done. And my step 2 would be to undo the division by multiplying. And since I'm dividing by 8/15, I'm going to multiply both sides by 8/15. 25 3/5 times 8/15 is equal to r divided by 8/15 times 8/15. And again, the dividing by 8/15 and multiplying by 8/15 cancel each other out, and I'm left with just r. And 25 3/5 times 8/15 is 13 49/75. And that is my solution. R equals 13 49/75. So we can see that when we're dealing with rational numbers, we have a lot more complex numbers. This by no means is mental math. So you definitely have to use the strategies we've been using all along in all of these videos for solving these equations. We've slowly built up the difficulty level. So now you should be able to handle these if you've been practicing those methods in all the previous equations.